Hey guys, this is Alex Pierce, and in this video I'm going to show you how to use 360 video and do projection mapping in Assimilate Live FX, both for large wraparound walls like this one, as well as another common configuration, which is a flat wall, two side walls, and a ceiling. I'll be using footage from SimPlates, sim-plates.com, as well as PlatePros, platepros.com, but any 360 media will work. Alright, let's jump right in. Using 360 video in Live FX is very, very simple. In fact, I'm going to do the entire 20-minute tutorial. I'm going to do the whole thing in 30 seconds, and then I will spend the rest of the time explaining all of the advanced features about it. But really, all you have to do to get 360 video to projection map onto a big, complex wall is projection setup, drag your 360 footage into here, make sure it's 360 and spherical, press create, and that is it. You're done. You're set up. You're ready to go. No matter if your wall is a big round wall or it's one like this, you are good to go. Your camera, if you have camera tracking enabled, will automatically be working and everything is good to go. That's the whole tutorial. If you want to stick around and listen to all the advanced features and how do you change this and how do you change that, definitely stay tuned. Here's the rest of the tutorial. So the first setup we'll look at is, let's say you have a large wall like this that wraps around. I'm going to show you the very easiest basic way to set this up. Let's import some footage. I've already done it, but I'll just show you the process. Import clips, volumes, exFAT, and we'll go to PlatePros and double click on this. And now we have our footage here. It's good to double click into your footage and make sure that the media is set up correctly. So in this case, it did read Rec 2020, but the scene is, I think it's actually HLG, and I only know that because I use this stuff a lot. But just make sure that your clip color settings are set up properly. You might also want to go into settings, monitors, and make sure your interface or dual head or your wall is set up correctly. And basically what this does is it converts it from the media, which is HLG in this case, and it converts it to 709 so that our monitor can read it. And this monitor just turns on and off these settings here. So once we have it set up correctly, let's go to projection setup, and we're going to drag the 360 clip into this little spot here. We're going to make sure our wall is selected. We're going to make sure that it is also active. If you have more than one, this can be something that trips people up. So we have our active wall. We're going to give this a name, so I'll call this tutorial. And you can select timeline or use a single clip. Timeline will do everything on the timeline. And then we want to make sure that it's set to Equirectangular 360. The PlatePros the metadata was inside the clip, so it automatically saw that and changed it. But depending on where you get your clip from, you might need to tell it, hey, this is 360. Also, if you are using a cylindrical instead of 360, you can choose that here. Then go to spherical for the projection type. If you have camera tracking set up, you can go ahead and set that up now. You can turn on frustum highlight if you want. I'm going to keep it off, and I'm going to go ahead and press create. And now if I right click and go to stage manager, we can see our projection here. And so this looks pretty good. And if I go to my camera here, I can move this camera and we can visualize what the projection is actually doing. And so let's look at a few of the options we have now that we have set up this to our wall. If you go to the primaries, the very top layer, and click on EQ to wall, that stands for Equirectangular to wall, we can see a few things here. This you can just leave as default, but if we go into the projection tab, we get a few options here. So right now it is linked to the shot camera, and that means if I go to the camera, as I move, it's going to be linked to it. If you don't want that, you can turn that off here, and then you can move it manually. You can have now your camera does not change. It doesn't change no matter where your camera moves. Depends on your workflow if whether you want that or not. I'm going to keep it linked for now. You can also change the input. So right now you can see the camera is facing forward, but the front part of the plate is not forward. So you can change that here by panning. If you hold down shift, you can go in smaller increments. So let's say we want that to be our front view. So we're going to go 45 degrees. And so this is how you can change which part of the 360 you're viewing. So let's say now you want to see the opposite of this. You can do plus 180, and that will, and then enter one more time. And now we're looking the opposite direction. Now we're looking forward. And you can do all kinds of math in here. So if I just do minus 90, we can see our right plate. And of course now if I do minus 180, we'll see our other plate. So that's one way of working with 360 video when you have a big wraparound volume like this. There are some more advanced things you can do. I'm going to show that at the end of the video. For now, let's look at another example. Okay, so now we're going to look at using a 360 video in a different type of configuration where you have a front wall, a left wall, right wall, and a ceiling. And the way we're going to do it is very similar. We're going to go to projection setup, and we're going to drag this into our clip here. We're going to do 360 spherical. This time I have a different wall selected. So this has a front wall, two side walls, and a ceiling. And then what we're going to do is do create. And if we right click, we can see that it's actually already set up to be working just fine. This is one of the SimPlates. This is the SimPlates content here. So now by default, this is going to be linked to your camera. So if I move in close, you can see it actually does change the projection from the camera, which I think for most use cases is probably what you're going to want to do. And I can go ahead and pan over. The pan, you're not going to see much with the panning, but the height and the Z depth you will see a lot. And this is probably going to work for the majority of people right out of the gate. But let's say you do want the side walls to not move or the ceiling to not move. Then what we need to do is unlink it from the camera. And so let's look at how to do that. So if we look at the node tree here, you can get to the node tree on this right menu under node tree. We can see how it's set up. So we have our projection comp at the top, and then we have, in this case, the walls are named front, left, right, and ceiling. So if we click on any one of these, we're going to get the ability to change some of this stuff. So let's click on the top one. We always want to have the top one selected to do a lot of our, like our camera projection and all that sort of stuff. So if we want to, let's say that our ceiling, we don't want that to be affected by our tracking. Have this one, the top one selected, push this lock button or unlock. So unlock will let you go see what it looks like. Lock will keep the top node in the viewport and allow you to change things without changing the viewport. So for now, I think I will just unlock it and click on our ceiling projection here. Under the EQ to wall setting here, we have this projection. We have wall and projection. So under projection, you can choose to not link to shot camera. So if we keep it linked for a second and we just move the camera. Okay, I will lock the top node here. And now when I click on the ceiling projection, we can still see our stage manager. And we're going to keep that here. Now I'm going to click back on the top node and I'm going to move our camera just so we can see right now the ceiling does move with the camera. And let's say we don't want that. What we can do is go into the ceiling projection, go to EQ to wall, projection, and then unlink from shot camera. And then now if we click back on our top view, camera, now when we move, the ceiling doesn't actually change. It doesn't move at all. And maybe that's what we want because we don't want our reflections to change. The other thing that we can do in that view is we can go to, with the ceiling projection clicked on, EQ to wall, we can change, where the wall is, where the content is. We can tilt it down. Let's pan it over. Let's roll it the other way. You can do all sorts of stuff here. We can, if we have the top node selected, we can have a global change for the positioning of our 360 video. But what if we want to have a individual control over each one of the walls? Basically, what you want to do that is go into the node tree and change it on the projection. But one thing that is very important to note is that if you change any of these and then you go back to the parent node and you change it here globally, it will override anything you've done there. So it takes a little practice for you to get the hang of it, but I'll show you what I'm talking about. It might make a little bit more sense after we do it. So with our node tree open here, have node tree selected. We have the front, left, right, and ceiling. So if I go to our left wall, if I go to our left wall here, and under the Live FX menu, under the equirectangular to wall menu, you can see we have link to shot camera, and this was all enabled before. I can actually go back and enable this all, so we're all on the same page here. So it's all linked. And now what we can do is, if we change it here, and you see that there's this white line here, that means there is an animation set up somehow. And so we can clear that by going reset, and let's do that on all the nodes just so that we're all starting from the same position here. And let's go to our left wall. Let's keep it linked for now, and I'm going to go ahead and pan this to be let's just do something specific like this. Let's do the same with the right. So we're gonna pan the other way, and for the front we'll also pan just so that we have some numbers, and you can see they're independent of each other. I can move these and do whatever I want to each one of these. And if I move the camera, let's take a look at that. If I have the camera and I move it up and I move it over, oops, definitely don't do what I just did. You want to make sure you're on the top node when you mess with the camera settings. Inside of here, these cameras should not be active. So the top node only has the camera active. And now you can see the camera projection still works even with their independent pans and their independent offsets. And so I'm going to go back to the left projection here, EQ to wall, projection. And let me go back here and actually just, what I'm going to do here is, if you want to make it sort of seem like a wider field of view or a tighter field of view, one thing you might do is unlink from shot camera, and then you can pretend like it's further away by moving it further away in the X. And you can pretend like it's higher or lower moving the Y, but basically you can manually move your camera settings and get sort of a wider field of view or a tighter field of view if you want it. That's one way you can do it here. But now if I move the camera, I have the top node selected, and I move the camera, it's not going to be affecting that left wall. So you just have to be careful. It all depends. Again, everything sort of depends on your project, maybe even on your shot. So in this case, if I had a small stage like this, I probably don't need it tracking that wall, and that would work great. But the reason I said it earlier is, if you go to the top node here, and now we were to change this input, it's going to override all the settings we've done on the independent walls. So let's go ahead and do it. If I start changing this, you can see it deletes all of the work we did in here, and you can see the pan for the input is now all back to the same. So this really depends. I think for the default way of using this is going to make the most sense for most people, and you can use a global offset for the pan and the tilt and all that, and then maybe you need to unlink to shot camera and scale things or move things over in this and whatnot. But I think the global pan is probably going to make more sense for most people. So, but you just have to be very careful. No matter what you do, always save a version, before you do anything, especially if you're just trying something out. Go over to the version stack, add a version, and then continue working so you don't accidentally mess something up. Let's say I accidentally deleted something. I could go back to my versions and go back and see wherever I left off here. So versions is very helpful. Now I'm going to delete this one because it's messed up. I'll add a version. You can add a note here. So I'm going to say this one is good. And I'll change the color to purple. And then now I can easily see that. I'll make another version just so that I'm not overwriting that. Making versions is very, it doesn't cost anything. And so, use it to your advantage. Before you try anything new, or if the client likes where you're at, just make a new version and keep going. Or actually, if we just go back to our main our main comp at the very top, we can change this to be a dome. So if we change it to a dome, you have a few other options. You have a floor option, you have a radius, and this, you really have to be at the stage to physically understand if this is working correctly or not. But using this dome projection, you can fake parallax even more than you can with a sphere, camera sphere. So this is something I have had some good success by using dome, and then allowing, if you move X and Y, you do sort of get the sense that you're moving inside of a 3D space, even though this is a baked 360 plate. Okay, so now let's look at an advanced use case. So let's say we have this fully wrap around, and we also want to have 2D inserts that are basically just the front plate or just the side plate. So there's a few different ways you can do it, but the best way to do it is a little bit complex to set up, because basically what we want to do is make sure that we're not reading and writing the file more than one time. So I call that instancing the video. And to do that, it's a very specific steps we have to take. So let's go back to the construct. Let's add a black filler, and this is the important step here. So we're going to click on our footage. Now it's stuck to my mouse. I'm going to click on staging. I'm going to drop this on top of our other file here. So you can see if we have staging enabled, we can see it. If it's not enabled, it's not there. So if we click on this black frame, over on the side here we have staging. So here we have this staging tab here, see? So let's create a layer, and I'm going to call this background, and go to fill matte. I'm going to make sure that this is selected, that it's orange here. Fill matte. I'm going to grab this clip from the staging. I'm going to drop it in here. And you can see that there's only one file here in the staging. If I create another one, and I'll call this front, and I do the same thing, make sure it's selected, grab from staging, drop into our fill matte tab here, you can see that it's still, there's only one thing in the staging area, which means that it's still reading and writing the same clip. So this is important. You don't ever want to have more than one of your files under the staging tab. That means that it's reading and writing it more than one time. And so for 12K 360 video, it's important that you instance the video as much as you can. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn off this front one for now. We're just going to look at this background. So we're going to manually set up the same thing we did before, and it's not difficult. All you have to do is go to plugins and go to EQ to wall, so rectangular to wall, apply on layer, then link to stage manager, projection, link to shot camera. In this case, actually, I'm going to keep link to shot camera off, and I'll explain why in a minute. But if you want to turn it on, that's where you turn it on. And now, again, just like we did before, you can move this over. I'm going to change this to 45. Actually, no, I want this to be the front. So I'll do -135 in this particular clip. So now we're facing forward. You can see our clip is really short. I do need to go to the Live FX tab, change the out to be 720 frames, which is what it looks like here. Okay, so now we have we have the exact same setup we had before that we used with our projection setup. But the benefit now is that we can instance this video again and again and again to do other things. So now let's take this other layer that I've made. In fact, I'll just delete this and make a new one. So I'm going to create this, call it front. I'm going to go to fill matte, make sure the staging tab, drag this into here. And so I have this front clip here. What I'm going to do to this one is I'm going to go to plugins, effects VR, equirectangular to 2D, so EQ to 2D, apply on layer. Do not link to shot camera for now. I'm going to explain why here in a minute. And then we're going to go directly to plugins, Live FX, plane to wall, apply on layer, link to stage manager, and link to shot camera if you want it. And now if you open up stage manager, this little yellow rectangle is the plane that we just created. So we need to move this back in the correct Z space. So let's go ahead, and with the front layer selected, we're going to go to plane, to wall, and then under projection we have our options here. So if you haven't done the 2D projection stuff in Live FX, then maybe this is confusing for you. But if you've ever done any of the plane to wall projection stuff, this should be very familiar for you. But I'll just explain it a little bit here. So this basically, this Z is moving it back in Z depth, and this is a representation of this clip now. So if I make it bigger here, if I scale up or down, it's moving it in a Z depth like a traditional 2.5D workflow. And the benefit of using this in conjunction with this wraparound is that you can kind of get the best of both worlds. It all depends on your workflow, depends on the shot, depends on everything you need. But now what we can do, if we go into, in fact, before we go too far ahead, let me go ahead and orient this the correct way. So now to orient it the right way, what we have to do is go into the node tree. So we're going to go into the node tree, and under the plane to wall, you can see this is the one that we just did, plane to wall. Step back a step further into the EQ to 2D transform, and then here you can rotate your footage around. So I'm going to rotate it to be, let's see, which way do we want to go? We want to be going, yeah, let's go forward. So we'll go somewhere in this direction here. And now we can change the field of view. And we have essentially a 2D plate that we can use. And if we want it to be linked to the shot camera, we go back to the parent frame, and you click this front, and you link it here, okay? And that's very important. So if we go to camera now and activate, and we go up, let's see, yeah, so if we go in, right now we have it set so that this 2D plane is linked to the shot camera, and the outer is not linked to the shot camera. And I set it up that way on purpose for this tutorial. I don't know that you would really want to do this, but this could be something where your outer, your lighting and reflections don't move at all, but your inner frustum essentially does move, and you have full control over it as if it were a 2D plane. So this is can be really helpful, because then you can also get very straight lines, and you can do a similar thing with the left and right if you wanted to do more. But the main thing is that you make sure that you are instancing it, because otherwise you're going to run into performance issues. And this file is a ProRes file, and I'm reading it from an external drive, so I don't actually anticipate that it would run back at frame rate, but you get the idea. You should probably be using something like NotchLC and running from a fast NVMe drive internally if you can. All right, so that's going to wrap up this video. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe, do all that stuff. Hopefully this was really helpful, and it helps you create your own pipeline, your own workflow for what's going to make the most sense at your stage, with your shots, with your projects. Let me know if you have any questions, and if you're not already a part of the Live FX Discord, make sure to join. I will try to put a link to that in the description. All right, take care.